Hi, I'm Dan Holt. Have you ever taken a shortcut only to find out that you've gotten yourself lost? Come along today on the route of the 1853 Elliott Cutoff wagon train and see what happens when a whole wagon train gets lost.
For years, the Oregon Trail followed the Columbia River. Since they had to float wagons by raft and around a few rapids, a second Barlow Road was built. It was a toll road with a few hazards of its own. Then from 1852 to 1853, a shortcut was cleared, which promised to save 125 miles to Eugene. Several folks were afraid to try this new unproven route, but Elijah Elliott thought he could guide people from Fort Boise over the new trail even though he'd never been there. 1,000 people and 250 wagons decided to follow him over the shorter route. At first, going was easy, following the 1845 Meek Trail. But then Elliott took them on a long detour south around Malheur and Harney Lakes, possibly to avoid the wetlands on the regular trail. The extra days of travel wore the horses and oxen down and wasted precious provisions. The travelers then voiced strong disapproval of Elliott's leadership. It was now mid-September and getting close to winter, so 8 men were sent ahead to inform settlers in the Willamette Valley of their need for provisions. Meanwhile, after searching several days, Elliott found the trail across the Cascades. They saw the blaze marks that were left by the road crew just a few days earlier before they quit and went back. This was where Lapine now stands. This new trail wasn't easy to find. It went south of Diamond Peak for a landmark, but the 8 advance men mistook the south sister for Diamond Peak, and they had to cross the lava fields on foot. They found very little small game to keep alive on, and almost starved. Meanwhile, the wagon train plodded on over the steep, rugged terrain. This really wasn't a bad road. It's just when they took a wrong turn over there in eastern Oregon and then couldn't find the Lapine crossing that took too much time. There wasn't enough food or supplies to last for the extra days and no place to buy them. This is a scenic trail with lakes and streams all along the way. There's an abundance of wildlife up here, but not enough to feed 1,000 people, counting the other small wagon trains which were miles back on the trail. Today, 140 years later, Del Spencer and his wife from Oak Ridge still give guided tours to retrace this early route.
One of those road viewers was Robert Walker, and he was the one in 1853 who was chosen to slash the trail for the free emigrant road. He did not take this turn. Instead, he went down into Paddy's Valley. And if you are familiar with the contours of that valley, it's a dead-end valley with very steep walls. Why Leah tried to figure out why he didn't follow the route that they had taken in 1852, which is what these pioneers had to do coming down. They just practically had to make their own trail coming this way. They couldn't go down into the valley. It was just too steep and too treacherous. And so they came down this way, making their own trail, basically.
Same direction that we were following that road and then headed down Pioneer Gulch.
We had lots of water.
That's right. First time I didn't have to
So are
get
you
my
getting
water.
school?
You know,
Some of the scars from the wagon wheels are still visible in the rocks even after all these years. On the route around Paddy's Valley that Mrs. Spencer was telling us about is one of Oregon's natural wonders. At this campground is Indio Springs, the beginning of a very cold creek that comes right out of the ground. Notice that this is a dry creek bed above this spot, yet many springs coming out of the ground start a good-sized creek, just the same as the Metolius River over near Sisters, Oregon. At the campground, just 200 feet downstream from where the creek starts, it becomes a good-sized stream. It's pretty, but ice cold. A man took a bet one time that he could stay in it for 5 minutes. He did it, but he was numb and half frozen when they finally pulled him out. Because of the long detours, by the time the first wagon train passed here, they were about out of supplies, and even had to kill some of their oxen for food. Meanwhile, on October 16th, one of the 8 men who went ahead for help was found near Lowell, Oregon. He was half-starved and on foot, eating only squirrels, hawks, and chipmunks. They had separated trying to find help. Within hours, riders were sent down the valley to get help for the wagons. By the time the wagon train got near Rigdon Meadows, they were all pretty well exhausted and discouraged. Then help from the valley finally arrived. With fresh food and livestock, they were able to make it on down. This is about 20 miles south of where Oak Ridge now stands. The last people of the advance party were also found near Springfield just 4 days later. After 13 years had passed, the Oregon Central Military Road was built through here, and in another 5 years, Stephen Rigdon and his wife Zilphia built a way station here, where they provided meals and blacksmith repairs for travelers that went through here for 27 years.
Rigdon's cabin. I'm standing on his fireplace. I think, yeah. We surmise that these rocks were left from his fireplace when the cabin was torn down. Yeah, forget about the military road. It went right through the middle of the meadow, east and west. We'll walk over there. This lady found the water pipe.
It's got water in it too.
It has. Can't believe that.
This was a popular meadow. A few years after Rigdon's left here, people built a few summer cabins, but they had to be burnt down around 1930 so no one would get hurt in them and sue the Forest Service, who also occupied this spot. A 3C camp was also located here for about 5 years.
And then Rigdon go up there and shoot the bear. That was one of his main products, was bear grease. Because when people got here with their wagons, wagons need a lot of grease to keep going up the road. So Lawrence said he got $1 a gallon for bear grease. That was higher than the price of gasoline.
You can use to sit at. The turkey on white cheddar. Here's ham. And this turkey and Swiss on wheat.
Not only was the wagon train rescued here, but these folks retracing the route got their lunch here too.
I'm Dell Spencer, and we're here today with, what's your name?
Linda Hayden.
Linda Hayden.
And
Linda,
some
we're
of them
on
look
this
different.
tour of the Free Immigrant Road,
Right.
and I understand
Some of the
that
boys I thought were really good looking. Just
your
they weren't.
ancestors were some of the
I
people
remember a
that
couple
came on that Free Immigrant Road. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Who were they?
One died very young.
My great-great-grandfather, Casper Rickard, led a family group of the Rickards and Kimes. He and his brother had married 2 of the Kime sisters, and another Kime sister and her husband, a Kime brother, and then at the last minute the father came along too, and along with the Rickard brothers. There were 3 original Rickard brothers that came
And they came back to Corvallis.
from Indiana, Pike County, Indiana.
Now, did they settle up at Irish Bend?
Yeah, in that vicinity.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Monroe area. They're buried in the Monroe Cemetery. Talking about crossing the plains, and there was an Indian that approached Casper Rickard and asked to borrow his gun, and he, through sign language, indicated that his family was starving and that he needed food. And so he wanted to borrow a gun to go shoot a buffalo, and Casper loaned him his gun, and the rest of the people thought he was absolutely crazy and said the Indian would probably turn the gun on the train. And in fact, he didn't. He showed up a few days later and gave the gun back, and also warned them that there had been some sort of massacre at a fort that they were rapidly approaching and told them not to stop the fort, to go around, and they did, and heard later that there had indeed been people killed at the fort. So this young man saved their lives by sending them around.
He'd be a good neighbor and lend his
Yeah,
gun to
yeah.
somebody. Then.
So, did he ever get his gun back?
He got his gun back, yeah. And there was only one bullet used. And the fellow had gotten his buffalo.
Mrs. Pengra, who came the old Oregon Trail, described the fact that the dust was clear up to the top of the wheels on those Conestoga wagons on the old route. So you can see why they wanted to take a new route, even when they had to break sagebrush to do it.
So when you said that the 1,000 people that were on this trail, they're actually made up of a lot of smaller. Did they all come together and get trapped at the same time then? Is that what they sort of backed up, or they all?
By the time they got to the Deschutes and above, they were pretty well in sight of each other. At least one train to the next.
None of them knew where they were going.
Yeah. Well, they had the general idea. In fact, they felt that to describe it as the Lost Wagon Train was unfair because they didn't feel like they were ever lost. They were looking for the road that they were supposed to have brought through, and they couldn't find it. It was 30 miles up from where they found the Deschutes, and scouts had to go up and look for it.
Because of the swelling streams in October, some folks had to abandon their wagons and come back for them in the spring. Here at Big Pine Opening, a man buried some gold ingots under a stump. He could never find the right stump, and it wasn't until over 100 years later that someone actually found them. When Joseph Petty's wagon was crossing here by Boulder Grade, the load shifted and killed his wife. There were many trials and tears involved in getting Oregon's free land. I'm sure several learned to pray and put their trust in God. Eugene had a population of about 1,000 in 1853, and in another 3 years all the land claims were taken. A married man could get 360 acres, and their older children could each get 120 acres. I'm afraid there's no more homestead land left anywhere now, but we don't have to give up our pioneering spirit. There are still many roads and trails left to explore in Oregon.
It took some pretty rugged people to try some of these new trails into Oregon, but shortly after this came the railroad and then the automobile, and today it's easy to cross this great country that God has blessed us with.